The first thing Maya noticed about Adrian was not his face, his expensive suit, or the quiet way the entire private dining room seemed to bend around his presence. It was the ring on his right hand. She had been carrying a tray of drinks toward his table when the silver band caught the warm light from the chandelier above, flashing for only a second before disappearing beneath the shadow of his sleeve. Maya stopped without meaning to. The reaction was so sudden that she nearly forgot what she was doing. She had seen that ring before. Not on Adrian, not in a photograph, and certainly not on the hand of a man whose name appeared in business magazines and whose arrival had made half the restaurant staff straighten their backs. She had seen it years ago resting against the worn fingers of her older brother Lucas. For a moment, the crowded restaurant seemed strangely distant. The clinking of crystal glasses, the low conversations, the soft music playing somewhere near the bar, all of it faded behind a memory she had spent years trying not to touch. Lucas had been a firefighter. He had been the kind of man who came home exhausted, smelled faintly of smoke, and still found the energy to ask Maya whether she had eaten. He had kept very few things that he considered precious, but there had always been one silver ring he refused to take off. Maya remembered it clearly because when they were children, she used to tease him about it. The ring was simple, almost plain, with a narrow dark line running around its center. Lucas had never told her much about where it came from. Whenever she asked, he would smile and say that some things were easier to understand when the right time came. She had forgotten about that conversation for years. Until now. Miss Adrian's voice brought her back. Maya blinked and realized she was still standing beside the table with the wine glasses in her hands. Adrian was watching her carefully. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with the controlled expression of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected other people. There was nothing openly threatening about him yet. Maya understood why the staff had been whispering about his arrival all evening. Adrian Cole did not simply enter a room. He changed its atmosphere. "I'm sorry," Maya said, quietly setting the glasses down. "Your wine." Adrian gave a brief nod. "Thank you." Maya should have walked away. Instead, her eyes returned to the ring. She tried to stop herself, but the question escaped before she could reconsider. "May I ask you something?" Adrian looked up. "Of course." Maya hesitated. She suddenly felt foolish. Perhaps it was only an old memory playing tricks on her. There were thousands of silver rings in the world. Her brother could not possibly be connected to this stranger simply because they wore similar pieces of jewelry. "That ring," she said, keeping her voice low. Adrian's fingers moved instinctively over the band. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "What about it? Where did you get it?" For the first time that evening, Adrian seemed genuinely caught off guard. His hand closed around the ring as though protecting it from being taken. He glanced down at the silver band before answering. "It was given to me a long time ago." Maya's heart began beating faster. "By someone you knew?" Adrian was silent for a moment. "No," he finally said. "Not exactly." The answer made Maya's stomach tighten. She looked at the ring again. There was something about its shape, the tiny scratch near the edge, even the way the metal had dulled with age, that felt painfully familiar. "My brother had one," she whispered. Adrian's eyes lifted immediately. "Your brother?" Maya nodded. "Lucas." The name seemed to hang between them. Adrian did not move. His face, which had been calm and unreadable all evening, suddenly lost its color. Maya noticed his thumb freeze against the ring. "Lucas," what he asked. His voice was quieter now. "Lucas Bennett." Adrian stared at her as though she had spoken a name he had buried 20 years ago. Maya did not understand his reaction. She only knew that something had changed. A moment earlier, he had been a powerful businessman sitting alone at a table, reserved for people accustomed to being obeyed. Now, he looked like someone who had just opened a door to a room he had spent decades refusing to enter. "He was a firefighter," Maya continued carefully. "He died several years ago." Adrian swallowed. "How long ago?" "Not 20 years, she said. "If that's what you're thinking." His eyes sharpened. Maya frowned. Why? Adrian did not answer. He looked down at the ring again, and for several seconds his hand remained perfectly still. "Did Lucas ever tell you where he got his?" he asked. Maya shook her head. "No. He only said it belonged to someone he needed to remember." She paused, searching her memory. "Actually, there was something else." Adrian looked at her. What he told me once, that the ring was connected to a promise. Adrian's breathing changed. What promise? Maya could hear the uncertainty in her own voice now. I don't know. He never explained it. She glanced toward the other tables, suddenly aware that they were having a conversation that felt far too personal for a restaurant. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up. She reached for the empty glass in front of him, ready to leave. Adrian stopped her with a quiet question. Maya. She looked back. How did you know my name? For the first time, a faint smile touched his face, though it carried no humor. Your name is on the reservation. Maya nodded. Adrian leaned back slowly. His eyes remained fixed on her. Did your brother work a warehouse fire in the city 20 years ago? Maya's fingers tightened around the glass. The question made no sense. She had never mentioned a warehouse. I don't know, she said. Lucas worked dozens of fires. Why? Adrian looked toward the dark window beside the table. Outside, headlights moved through the rain, blurred into long streaks of gold. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and disappeared. Because he said after a long silence, someone saved my life in a warehouse fire 20 years ago. Maya felt the room tilt beneath her. She said nothing. Adrian touched the ring again, almost unconsciously. I was 17, he continued. I don't remember everything. Smoke, heat, a metal door that wouldn't open. I remember thinking I wasn't going to get out. He stopped as though the memory had suddenly become too close. Then a firefighter found me. Maya stared at him. Lucas, she whispered. Adrian did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned the silver ring slowly around his finger. I never knew his full name, he said. I searched for him afterward. For years. I thought he was dead. Then I thought maybe I had remembered the wrong details. Eventually, I convinced myself that finding him didn't matter anymore. His eyes returned to Maya. But he gave me this before he left. Maya looked at the ring, then at Adrian. He gave you that? Adrian nodded. There were two. The words landed softly, but they seemed to change everything. Maya's throat tightened. She remembered Lucas sitting at their kitchen table years ago, turning a silver ring around his finger while staring at nothing. She remembered asking why he never removed it. She remembered his answer, though she had never understood it. Some promises outlive the people who make them. I don't know if we're talking about the same man, Maya said. It was the only thing she could think to say. Adrian gave a slow nod. Neither do I. Yet something in his expression told her that he already suspected the truth. Maya picked up her tray and stepped away from the table, but Adrian's voice followed her. Maya. She turned. Does your brother still have his ring? For a moment she couldn't answer. Her brother had been gone long enough that his belongings were no longer kept in the places where she remembered them. But she knew exactly where that ring was. She had seen it after his funeral, placed carefully inside a small wooden box with a photograph and a firefighter's badge. Yes, she finally said. Adrian closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them, the guarded businessman was gone. In his place was a man standing at the edge of a memory he had carried for half his life. Then he whispered almost to himself, I think I may have finally found him. Maya walked away without another word. She did not yet know what Adrian had survived, what Lucas had done that night, or why two identical rings had crossed the paths of three people separated by 20 years. She only knew that the silver band on Adrian's hand looked exactly like the one resting inside her brother's old wooden box, and for the first time since Lucas's death, Maya had the uneasy feeling that his story was not finished. 20 years earlier, Adrian had been 17 years old enough to believe he understood danger, and young enough to believe it could never truly happen to him. The warehouse had been abandoned for years, but teenagers from the neighborhood sometimes slipped inside through a broken section of fencing. Adrian had gone there that evening with two friends, expecting nothing more than a few hours of reckless exploration before going home. He remembered the smell first. Not smoke, but something sharper, almost chemical, hanging in the stale air. Then came the sound, a deep metallic crack from somewhere beyond the loading area. One of his friends shouted that they should leave. Adrian turned toward the exit. He never made it. Flames erupted behind a row of stacked crates racing along the walls with terrifying speed. Within seconds, the old warehouse transformed into a furnace. Smoke poured across the ceiling and dropped lower with every breath. The others managed to reach the broken fence, but Adrian became separated from them when a burning beam collapsed between the aisles. He tried to move around it, coughing violently, but another section of the ceiling crashed down. He fell hard, striking his shoulder against the concrete floor. His ears rang. For several seconds, he couldn't understand why he could no longer hear his friends. Then he saw the flames. They were between him and the only exit he knew. Adrian scrambled backward, but the smoke was already too thick. He covered his mouth with his sleeve and shouted for help. His voice disappeared into the roar. He shouted again. Nothing. Panic took over. He was 17, trapped in a burning building, and suddenly the future he had always assumed would be waiting for him no longer seemed guaranteed. Outside, sirens began to rise in the distance. Firefighters arrived within minutes, but to Adrian those minutes felt endless. He crawled toward a doorway he could barely see through the smoke. His hands were trembling. His lungs burned. Every breath felt smaller than the one before it. Then through the darkness he heard someone shouting, "Fire department, can you hear me?" Adrian tried to answer but could only cough. "I'm here," he finally managed. A figure appeared through the smoke. The firefighter was wearing full protective gear, his face partially hidden behind a mask, but Adrian could see his eyes. They were steady, focused, calm. "Stay down," the firefighter ordered. "I'm getting you out." Adrian shook his head, barely able to speak. "I can't move. You don't have to." The firefighter crouched beside him and pulled Adrian upright. "Put your arm around my shoulder." Adrian obeyed. The firefighter guided him through the smoke, keeping his own body between the teenager and the flames. They had almost reached the exit when a violent explosion shook the building. Something above them collapsed. The firefighter pushed Adrian forward just before the debris came down. Adrian hit the floor near the doorway, but the firefighter disappeared beneath a cloud of smoke and dust. "Sir," Adrian screamed. "Sir," there was no answer. He tried to crawl back, but the heat drove him away. Then the firefighter emerged. He had blood running down one side of his face and one arm hung awkwardly at his side. Still, he kept moving toward Adrian. "Go," he said. "Now." "What about you? I'm right behind you." Adrian wanted to believe him. He stumbled toward the exit, coughing and half blind. A firefighter outside grabbed him and dragged him into the cold night air. Adrian collapsed onto the pavement. He could breathe again, but his eyes immediately searched for the man who had brought him out. "The firefighter," he gasped. He went back. One of the rescuers looked toward the warehouse. "Who?" "The man who saved me." He went back inside. Before anyone could answer, another explosion shook the street. Flames burst through the roof. Adrian watched helplessly as firefighters rushed toward the building. He was wrapped in a blanket and placed beside an ambulance, but he refused to stop looking at the burning structure. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Finally, someone emerged from the smoke. It was the same firefighter. He was exhausted, his uniform blackened, his breathing heavy. Adrian recognized him immediately. The man removed his helmet and mask and approached him. His face was younger than Adrian had expected. There was soot across his forehead and a cut above his eyebrow. "You okay, kid?" he asked. Adrian nodded, though tears had begun mixing with the soot on his cheeks. "You came back." The firefighter gave a tired smile. "Of course I did. You could have died." The man looked back at the burning warehouse. "That's the job." Adrian shook his head. "No. You didn't have to come back for me." The firefighter crouched, so they were at eye level. "Yes, I did." There was something in the way he said it that Adrian never forgot. It wasn't pride. It wasn't duty spoken for the benefit of anyone watching. It was simply a fact. A person was trapped, so he went back. A few minutes later, as paramedics prepared to take Adrian to the hospital, the firefighter noticed the boy staring at him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Adrian." "Adrian what, Cole?" The firefighter smiled. "Lucas Bennett." The name stayed with Adrian. So did the small silver ring on Lucas's finger. Under the flashing red lights, the ring caught the glow of the ambulance and seemed almost bright against the soot-blackened glove. Adrian pointed toward it. "That's a nice ring." Lucas looked down at his hand. For the first time, his expression became distant. He slowly removed the ring. This Adrian nodded. Lucas turned it over between his fingers. "It's nothing special." "Then why do you wear it?" Lucas smiled. "Because someone once gave it to me and asked me to remember something." Adrian waited. Lucas looked toward the burning warehouse, then back at the teenager. "That being strong isn't about being the person everyone fears." He paused. "It's about being the person someone else can depend on when they're afraid." Adrian didn't fully understand. He was still shaken, still trying to process how close he had come to dying. Lucas reached into a small pouch attached to his gear and took out a second silver ring. It was nearly identical to his own. Adrian stared at it. There are two, there used to be. Lucas placed one ring in Adrian's palm. Keep it. Adrian looked confused. Why Lucas closed Adrian's fingers around the silver band? Maybe you'll understand someday. The firefighter stood, but before he turned away, he looked directly into Adrian's eyes. When you become strong, protect someone else. Adrian held the ring tightly. I promise. Lucas nodded once. Good. Then he walked back toward the other firefighters. Adrian never forgot that moment. He never forgot the smoke, the sirens, the heat, or the man who had walked back into a burning building when everyone else was trying to escape. He also never forgot the weight of the silver ring in his hand. At the hospital, doctors treated his burns and bruises. His parents arrived terrified and furious, demanding to know how he had ended up inside the warehouse. Adrian barely listened. His mind remained fixed on Lucas. He asked nurses about the firefighter several times, but no one seemed to know where he had gone. By morning, the emergency crews had moved on, the warehouse had been declared too dangerous to enter, and Lucas's name appeared only briefly in the official report. Adrian kept asking questions. He wanted to thank him. He wanted to return the ring. Most of all, he wanted to understand why a stranger had risked his life for him. But the answers never came. The years that followed changed Adrian in ways he could never have predicted. He grew older. He became successful. He built companies, made money, gained influence, and eventually became the kind of man whose name opened doors before he even reached them. Yet through every stage of his life, the silver ring remained with him. He wore it when he graduated. He wore it when he signed his first major business deal. He wore it when his father died, when his company nearly collapsed, and when he finally became wealthy enough to buy almost anything he wanted. Still, there was one thing money could never buy him an answer. Adrian searched for Lucas whenever he could. He contacted fire departments, searched old newspaper archives, paid researchers to examine records from the warehouse fire, and even returned to the neighborhood years later. Each attempt led nowhere. Sometimes he wondered whether Lucas had changed his name or moved away. Other times he feared that the firefighter had died in another call and that Adrian had simply never learned about it. But he never stopped looking. The promise Lucas had placed in his hands had become more than a sentence. It had become the quiet rule by which Adrian measured his life. Whenever he faced a decision involving power, money, or responsibility, he remembered the firefighter who had walked back into the flames. He began helping people anonymously. He funded scholarships without putting his name on them. He supported emergency responders and quietly paid medical bills for families who could not afford them. Yet even then, Adrian felt that he was only circling the meaning of Lucas's words. He had spent 20 years believing that one day if he found Lucas, he would finally be able to say thank you. He did not know that the search would end not with a firefighter standing in front of him, but with a woman carrying his memory. He did not know that the second ring had survived too. And he certainly did not know that the girl Lucas had once protected as his little sister would eventually walk into his life carrying the missing piece of a promise he had spent half his life trying to understand. By the following evening, the story had already changed. It was no longer about a silver ring, a firefighter, or a forgotten rescue 20 years ago. Inside the private club where rumors traveled faster than facts, Maya had somehow become the center of a story she had never asked to be part of. Everyone knew Adrian Cole had spoken to her for nearly 20 minutes after dinner. Everyone knew he had asked questions about Lucas. Everyone knew the two of them had left the dining room looking unsettled. What no one knew was what had actually been said. That uncertainty gave people room to invent their own version. Maya sensed something was wrong the moment she walked through the staff entrance the next morning. Two servers who normally greeted her fell silent. A hostess looked away too quickly. Someone near the kitchen whispered her name, followed by a laugh that stopped as soon as Maya turned around. She kept walking. She had learned long ago that rumors grew stronger when you chased every voice that carried them. But by the time she reached the employee locker room, the first accusation had already reached her. "You really played that well," Celia said from across the room. Maya looked at her. "Played what?" Celia folded her arms. "Don't do that. Do what? Pretend you don't know." Maya stared at her colleague, confused. Celia gave a bitter smile. "You recognize Adrian's ring?" suddenly reveal that you're the sister of the firefighter who saved his life, and then somehow he spends half the night talking to you. That's quite a coincidence. Maya's expression hardened. It wasn't planned. Of course it wasn't. Lucas was my brother, and Adrian is worth hundreds of millions. The words landed harder than Maya expected. She looked around the room. No one defended her. Some staff members pretended to organize their lockers. Others watched openly. Are you saying I knew who he was before he came here? Maya asked. I'm saying you knew exactly what you were doing. Maya shook her head. I didn't even know Adrian had anything to do with Lucas until last night. Celia shrugged. That's your story. Maya wanted to answer, but the supervisor's radio crackled from the hallway. Maya Barrett, report to the manager's office. She walked there with her head held high, even though her stomach had tightened into a knot. Randall Pierce was waiting behind his desk. Beside him sat the club's operations director, a man Maya had seen only a handful of times. His expression was formal, distant, and already suspicious. Sit down, Randall said. Maya remained standing. Am I being disciplined? We're having a conversation. About what? Randall exchanged a glance with the director. A complaint has been raised concerning your interaction with Mr. Cole. Maya almost laughed from disbelief. A complaint? There are concerns that you may have deliberately encouraged a personal relationship with a high-value guest. Maya's face went still. I served him dinner. You approached him about his ring, because it looked exactly like my brother's. And then you told him your brother was a firefighter, because he asked. Randall leaned back. Maya, do you understand the position this puts the club in? I don't understand what I did wrong. The director finally spoke. Mr. Cole is an important client. If an employee uses a personal story to gain access, financial assistance, or preferential treatment, the club has to investigate. Maya stared at him. I didn't ask him for anything. Did he offer? He offered to help. And did you accept? No. That answer seemed to surprise them. Randall frowned. You expect us to believe that Maya looked directly at him. You can believe whatever you want. It's still the truth. The meeting ended without a formal suspension, but Maya was told to remain away from Adrian's table if he returned. She was also warned that any further private conversation with him could result in disciplinary action. When Maya left the office, she felt strangely numb. She had spent years learning how to survive difficult rooms. She knew how to deal with rude customers, demanding managers, wealthy guests who snapped their fingers, and people who treated service workers as if they were invisible. But this was different. For the first time, people weren't judging her work. They were judging her character. And they had decided who she was without asking her a single honest question. Adrian heard about the accusation before lunch. His assistant called him while he was in a meeting. There's an issue at the club, she said. Maya Barrett has been questioned by management. Adrian's expression changed. Why? They're suggesting she may have approached you because of your connection to Lucas. Adrian stood from the conference table. Who suggested that? The club's management. Put me through to them. Within an hour, Adrian had spoken directly to the club's director. His voice remained controlled, but there was a sharpness beneath every word. If you have a problem with Miss Barrett, you can discuss it with me. The director hesitated. Mr. Cole, we're simply following procedure. Then follow the facts. Of course. No, you are following an assumption. Adrian looked out through the glass wall of his office. The city stretched below him, filled with people moving from one appointment to another, each carrying stories no one else could see. Maya did not know who I was when she noticed the ring, he said. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for a position. She didn't even ask me to contact her. We understand that, but do you? Adrian interrupted. Because from where I'm standing, you're punishing a woman for recognizing her own brother's ring. The director became quiet. Adrian could have ended the problem immediately. One phone call could have cost the club a major account. Another could have forced the manager to apologize publicly. He had enough influence to make the accusation disappear before the afternoon. Instead, he went to see Maya. He found her behind the service corridor during a short break, sitting alone on an overturned crate with a cup of untouched coffee between her hands. She looked tired, not frightened, angry. Adrian stopped a few feet away. You should have called me. Maya looked up. Why? Because they're accusing you. I know. I can fix this. She shook her head. No. Adrian seemed genuinely surprised. No, I don't want you to fix it. Maya, they're questioning your integrity. I know. Then let me handle it. She stood. That's exactly what I don't want. Adrian studied her. Why? Maya's voice remained calm, but there was pain beneath it. Because if you step in, they'll never believe me. I can prove what happened. You can prove that you're powerful. She held his gaze. That's not the same thing. Adrian said nothing. Maya continued. If you threaten the club, they'll say I manipulated you. If you make them apologize, they'll say they were afraid of you. If you give me money, they'll say that's what I wanted all along. She swallowed. And if you protect me because of Lucas, then everything I say from now on will sound like I came here looking for something. Adrian lowered his eyes. She was right. He had spent his life solving problems with resources. Money, lawyers, connections, influence. But Maya wasn't asking to be rescued. She was asking for the chance to stand on her own feet. So what do you want me to do? He asked. Nothing. Adrian frowned. Nothing. Not nothing. Maya took a breath. Let the truth speak for itself, and if it doesn't, then I'll find a way to make it speak louder. For the first time, Adrian almost smiled. There was something familiar in her stubbornness, something that reminded him of Lucas. But Maya wasn't Lucas. She was her own person, and she refused to become a debt Adrian needed to repay. The accusation spread beyond the club. Someone leaked a vague account of the incident to a local business blog, claiming that an employee had discovered a wealthy client's tragic past and attempted to use the connection to gain financial favor. Maya's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone who knew the club understood who the article described. Her phone began receiving messages from acquaintances, asking whether the rumors were true. She stopped answering. She went to work, did her job, and went home. But the whispers followed her everywhere. One evening, a customer left a small envelope beside her tip. Maya opened it after he left. Inside was a handwritten note. People like you always find a way to climb. There was no signature. She stood in the service station for several seconds, staring at the words. Then she folded the paper in half and threw it away. She refused to let a stranger's suspicion become her identity. Adrian continued his own investigation quietly. He hired no public relations team. He made no threats. Instead, he asked his assistant to locate the original records from the warehouse fire. Maya was doing the same thing from her side. She contacted the fire department archives. She searched through Lucas's old belongings. She called people who had known him. Some remembered him clearly. Others remembered only fragments. A retired firefighter told her Lucas had mentioned rescuing a teenage boy that night, but he couldn't remember the boy's name. Another former colleague recalled that Lucas had been injured during the operation and had returned to the building twice. None of it was enough to satisfy the club's management. They wanted certainty. Maya wanted it too. Not because she needed Adrian to believe her, but because she needed to know the truth about her brother. Lucas had been dead for years, and she had always believed she knew the important parts of his life. Now she realized there had been an entire chapter he had never told her about. One rainy afternoon, Adrian appeared at the archive where Maya was reviewing old fire reports. He didn't walk over immediately. He stood across the room until she noticed him. I said I wouldn't interfere, he said. Maya raised an eyebrow. Then why are you here? Because you were right. She closed the folder. About what? This isn't something I can buy my way out of. Maya watched him carefully. So what are you doing, looking? For Lucas, for the truth. She nodded. Then we're looking for the same thing. From that day forward, they worked separately but toward the same answer. They compared dates without manipulating evidence. They followed names in old reports. They searched newspaper archives and contacted witnesses. Every small discovery brought them closer to the night that had connected their lives. Meanwhile, Maya continued working at the club under a cloud of suspicion. She could have resigned. Several friends told her she should. Find another job, one of them urged. You don't owe them anything. But Maya stayed. She wanted her name cleared in the place where it had been questioned. She didn't want to leave with everyone believing the rumors had driven her away. She wanted to walk out one day knowing she had not surrendered to people who had judged her without evidence. Adrian respected that more than he could explain. He had met executives who would destroy competitors for less. He had known politicians who could not tolerate being contradicted. Yet Maya, who had almost no power compared with him, possessed something he rarely saw: the ability to refuse an easy rescue because she cared more about truth than comfort. One night after another long shift, Maya found Adrian waiting outside the club. "I found something," he said. Her heart began to race. "What?" He handed her a photocopy of an old report. The original incident log. Maya took it carefully. Her eyes moved across the faded page. There it was. The date, the warehouse address, the rescue operation. Then one line made her breath catch. Firefighter Bennett returned to the structure after initial evacuation to rescue an unidentified male juvenile. Maya's fingers began to tremble. Adrian watched her silently. "There's more," he said. She looked down. A handwritten note had been added at the bottom of the page. The ink was faded, but the words were still readable. Victim repeatedly asked for the identity of firefighter who returned for him. Maya closed her eyes. Lucas had been telling the truth all those years ago. The ring had not been a random keepsake. Adrian had not invented the connection, and she had not manipulated anyone. The evidence existed. It had simply been buried beneath 2 decades of time. Maya opened her eyes and looked at Adrian. "This is enough to clear me." "Not yet," he said. "Not by itself." Maya nodded. She understood. They needed more than a story. They needed proof that could withstand every accusation. She slipped the report back into its folder. "Then let's keep looking." Adrian smiled faintly. Together, Maya hesitated. "Beside each other," she corrected. "Not because you owe me anything." His expression softened. "I know. And not because I'm Lucas's sister. I know that too." She turned toward the street. "Good." Adrian walked beside her, leaving several feet between them. Neither spoke for a while. The rain had stopped, but the pavement still reflected the lights of the city. Maya no longer felt completely alone. The accusation had wounded her, but it had also forced her to discover something important. Her brother's past was not merely a tragedy she had inherited. It was a truth worth protecting. And Adrian was beginning to understand that protecting Maya did not mean standing in front of her and fighting every battle. Sometimes it meant standing beside her while she fought for herself. The old fire station stood at the edge of the city, squeezed between a row of warehouses and a narrow street that had changed almost completely since the night of the fire. Adrian parked across from the building and remained behind the wheel for a moment, looking at the faded sign above the entrance. 20 years earlier, the place had been filled with firefighters, dispatchers, paramedics, and investigators trying to understand what had happened inside the burning warehouse. Now, only a few retired personnel still remembered the incident clearly. Adrian had spent years searching for Lucas, but he had always searched as a man trying to find someone who had saved his life. This time, he was searching for evidence that could save Maya's reputation. He understood the difference. Money could open doors, but it could not change a record written 2 decades ago. Influence could make people listen, but it could not make a witness remember something that had never happened. If Maya was going to be cleared, the truth had to stand on its own. He entered the station with a list of names and dates Maya had helped compile. The archivist led him into a basement room, where boxes of old reports were stacked against the walls. The air smelled of paper, dust, and time. "Warehouse fires from that period are over there," the archivist said, pointing toward a metal shelf. Some of the files were damaged during a flood. Adrian thanked him and began searching. He found the incident report within an hour. Then he found something else, an additional operations log that had never been included in the main file. It contained the names of firefighters assigned to the rescue effort that night, including Lucas Bennett. Adrian stared at the name for a long moment. Seeing it in official ink felt different from hearing it in Maya's voice. This was not memory. It was history. He photographed every relevant page and sent copies to Maya. She responded with only 3 words, "Keep looking, Adrian." He smiled when he read the message. That was Maya. She didn't want one piece of evidence. She wanted the whole truth. Over the next several days, their search expanded. Maya contacted Lucas's former colleagues while Adrian followed archival records, newspaper photographs, and municipal reports. They discovered an old newspaper article that had been buried in a digital archive. The photograph showed the warehouse after the fire, its roof partially collapsed, smoke still rising from the broken structure. In the foreground stood several firefighters. Adrian zoomed in until the image became grainy. There was Lucas. Younger, exhausted, with a bandage across his forehead. One hand rested on the shoulder of a teenage boy wrapped in an emergency blanket. Adrian recognized himself immediately. His breath caught. For 20 years he had remembered that night in fragments. Now he was looking at proof that the memory belonged to the real world. Maya stared at the photograph beside him. "That's him," she whispered. "That's my brother." Adrian nodded. "And that's me." They sat in silence. Neither needed to say what the photograph meant. It confirmed that Lucas had been there. It confirmed that Adrian had been rescued. But the club's management could still argue that Maya had somehow manipulated the situation. They needed something stronger. They needed a witness who could connect the past to the present without having anything to gain from either of them. That witness turned out to be Father Daniel Mercer, a retired fire chaplain who had served with the department during the year of the warehouse fire. Maya found his name in an old personnel directory. He was living in a small town several hours away in a modest house surrounded by trees. When Maya called, she expected hesitation. Instead, the elderly man listened quietly as she explained why she was searching for him. "Lucas Bennett," he repeated. "I haven't heard that name in a long time." "Did you know him?" Maya asked. "I knew him well enough to know what kind of man he was." Father Mercer invited them to visit. Adrian initially wanted Maya to go alone, but she insisted that he come. This was not about his money or reputation. It was about Lucas. When they arrived, the retired chaplain greeted them at the door. His eyes moved from Maya to Adrian, then stopped. He studied Adrian's face for several seconds. "You're the boy," he said. Adrian felt a chill run through him. "You remember me?" Father Mercer smiled sadly. "I remember your eyes. You were terrified." Maya stepped closer. "You remember my brother?" The chaplain nodded. "I remember him every year." He invited them inside and led them to a room filled with old photographs, medals, and framed certificates. On one wall was a photograph of Lucas standing with several firefighters after a training exercise. Maya touched the edge of the frame with trembling fingers. She had seen photographs of her brother before, but never this one. In it, Lucas was laughing. Not posing, not looking heroic, just laughing with his colleagues. He talked about the boy he rescued, Father Mercer said. Adrian looked at him. He did. For years. The chaplain sat down slowly. Lucas wasn't a man who liked praise. In fact, he hated being called a hero. But that night affected him. He told me he had found a teenager trapped near the eastern side of the warehouse. Maya listened without moving. He went back because he heard the boy calling for help, Father Mercer continued. The roof was unstable. We told him not to go in again. He went anyway. Adrian lowered his eyes. He could still hear Lucas's voice from that night. Go. Now. I'm right behind you. Did he ever tell you the boy's name? Adrian asked. Father Mercer looked directly at him. Eventually. A long silence followed. He told me your name. Adrian's throat tightened. Why? Because you kept asking about him after the rescue. You wanted to find him. Maya looked between them. Why didn't Lucas tell me? Father Mercer smiled gently. Because Lucas didn't think what he had done was something to boast about. He once told me that if a child survived, that was enough. The chaplain paused before continuing. There was another thing he told me. Adrian's hand moved instinctively toward his ring. What he said, he had given you something. Maya looked at Adrian's hand. The ring. Father Mercer nodded. Lucas carried 2 matching rings. One had belonged to someone important to him. He said he wanted to give the second one to you because he believed you would need a reminder of what survival meant. Adrian felt his eyes burn. Did he tell you what he said to me? The old man smiled. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember the meaning. He said that one day when you became strong, you should use that strength to protect someone else. Maya closed her eyes. She had heard those words before, but now they came from someone who had no reason to invent them. For the first time, she understood why Lucas had never explained the ring. He had not wanted credit. He had wanted the lesson to continue. Father Mercer reached into a cabinet and removed a small envelope. I kept this because I knew someone might eventually come looking. Inside was a handwritten statement Lucas had given after the fire. It described the rescue and mentioned the unidentified teenager he had carried from the building. At the bottom was Lucas's signature. Maya read it twice. Adrian couldn't speak. The evidence was finally complete. The official report proved the rescue. The photograph showed Adrian and Lucas together. Former firefighters confirmed Lucas's actions. Father Mercer connected the ring, the promise, and Adrian to the same night. There was no room left for speculation. But Maya wanted one final thing. She wanted the truth spoken where the accusation had begun. They returned to the club with copies of every document. The manager called an emergency meeting with the staff. Maya stood at the front of the room while Adrian remained several steps behind her. He had insisted on that position. This was her moment. Randall Pierce looked uncomfortable as the evidence was placed across the table. The operations director read the official report first. Then he examined the photograph. Finally, Father Mercer's signed statement was read aloud. The room became silent. No one had anything left to say. Celia, who had once accused Maya of manipulating Adrian, looked down at the floor. Randall cleared his throat. Maya, the club acknowledges that the allegations against you were unfounded. Maya looked at him. Unfounded isn't quite the word. He frowned. What would you call it? She took a breath. They were unfair. Nobody moved. Maya continued. You didn't ask me what happened. You decided what kind of person I was because the truth sounded too convenient. Her voice remained steady. I don't want revenge. I don't want anyone fired. I just want my name restored. The director stood. Your record will be formally cleared. We will also issue a written statement to the staff. Maya nodded. It wasn't an apology big enough to erase the humiliation she had endured, but it was enough to restore what mattered. Her reputation had been questioned publicly. Now the truth would be acknowledged publicly too. When the meeting ended, several co-workers approached her. Some apologized awkwardly. Others simply said they were sorry. Maya accepted the words without pretending the past few weeks had not hurt. Celia was the last person to approach. She stood several feet away, visibly uncomfortable. I was wrong, she said. Maya looked at her. Yes, you were. Celia swallowed. I thought you were trying to use him. I know. I'm sorry. Maya studied her for a moment before nodding. Thank you for saying it. That was all. She didn't need to humiliate Celia in return. She had spent too much time defending her own dignity to find satisfaction in taking someone else's away. Outside the club, Adrian waited for her beneath the awning. How does it feel? He asked. Maya looked back through the glass doors. Strange. Because it's over. Because I thought being cleared would make me feel different. She smiled faintly. Mostly I'm just tired. Adrian nodded. You earned the right to be tired. They stood quietly for a moment. Then Maya looked at him. What happens now? Adrian knew what she meant. The search for Lucas had ended. The accusation was over. The truth was no longer hidden. Yet something about Lucas's words remained unfinished. I think, Adrian said slowly, we should ask what he would have wanted us to do with all of this. Maya understood immediately. The following weeks changed the direction of both their lives. Adrian had spent years supporting charities, emergency services, and scholarship programs, but most of his donations had been disconnected from the person who had saved him. Maya knew something Adrian didn't. She knew what happened to families after a firefighter died. She had watched the financial strain, the unfinished dreams, and the children who grew up without one parent because someone had chosen to run toward danger. They began researching programs that supported families of fallen firefighters. What they found was heartbreaking. Some children received short-term assistance after a tragedy, but long-term educational support was inconsistent. Scholarships ended. Emergency funds ran dry. Young people who had lost a parent were often expected to carry on as if grief had an expiration date. Maya looked at Adrian across the table one evening. We can do something about this. He nodded. I was thinking the same thing. They created the Second Alarm Foundation, named after the warning that follows an initial emergency call, the signal that more resources are needed because the situation is larger than first understood. To Adrian, the name carried another meaning. The first alarm had been the warehouse fire that changed his life. The second would be the choice to respond to the consequences left behind. The foundation would provide scholarships, tuition assistance, mentorship counseling resources, and long-term educational support for children of firefighters who died in the line of duty. Adrian contributed the initial funding. Maya helped design the program, insisting that families should never feel like charity cases. They shouldn't have to beg for help, she told him. Support should be something they can access with dignity, Adrian agreed. Together they created a system that followed children from school into higher education, offering assistance as their needs changed. The first scholarship recipient was the 12-year-old daughter of a firefighter who had died during a rescue operation. Maya met the girl in a quiet school library. The child held a photograph of her father against her chest and asked, "Why would strangers want to help us?" Maya thought about Lucas. "Because your father helped people he didn't know," she said. "Sometimes kindness travels farther than we ever get to see." The foundation grew slowly at first, then rapidly as firefighters' families learned about it. Adrian refused to put his name on the building. Maya refused to let hers become the center of attention either. The work mattered more than recognition. Months after the foundation opened, Adrian and Maya returned to the old warehouse site. The building was gone. In its place stood a new commercial complex, bright and modern, with almost no trace of what had happened there. Adrian touched the silver ring on his hand. Maya stood beside him, holding Lucas's matching ring in a small protective case. 20 years, Adrian said quietly. "I spent 20 years thinking I was looking for the man who saved me." Maya looked at him. "Maybe you were looking for what he wanted you to become." Adrian smiled. He understood now. Lucas had never asked him to spend his life repaying a debt. He had simply given a frightened teenager a piece of metal and a sentence that might one day help him understand what strength was for. The fire had taken lives, destroyed a building, and left scars that never completely disappeared. But one act of courage had continued moving through time. It had passed from Lucas to Adrian, from Adrian to Maya, and now from both of them to families they had never met. The past could not be changed. Lucas could not be brought back. But his final lesson was no longer trapped inside an old warehouse report or a silver ring. It had become something alive. Something that could keep protecting people long after the firefighter himself was gone. The truth had been uncovered. Maya's name had been restored, and the Second Alarm Foundation was beginning to change lives. Yet none of that meant that everything suddenly became easy. Some wounds did not disappear simply because the facts had finally been proven. Maya still had difficult mornings when she woke thinking about Lucas. Adrian still carried memories of the warehouse fire that could return without warning. They had both spent years carrying pieces of the past, and neither of them expected those pieces to disappear overnight. What changed was that they no longer had to carry them alone. In the months that followed, Adrian and Maya became partners in a way neither of them had planned. Their work with the foundation gave them a reason to see each other almost every day, but it was not the foundation itself that brought them closer. It was the quiet moments between the important ones. They learned each other's habits. Maya discovered that Adrian forgot to eat whenever he became absorbed in a problem. Adrian learned that Maya always carried peppermint tea in her bag because she disliked coffee after long meetings. She teased him about his obsession with schedules. He teased her because she could remember the names of dozens of scholarship applicants but somehow forgot where she had left her own keys. Their conversations slowly stopped being about Lucas, the fire, or the foundation. They began talking about ordinary things. Favorite movies, childhood memories, food they hated, places they wanted to visit. The strange things people did when they thought no one was watching. For the first time, Adrian began to know Maya not as Lucas's sister, but simply as Maya. And Maya began to see Adrian not as the wealthy man whose life her brother had once saved, but as the man who laughed quietly when he was nervous, who stayed late to read scholarship applications himself, and who sometimes stared out the office window when he was thinking about people he had lost. Their friendship developed without either of them naming it. It was there in the way Adrian automatically saved the last piece of chocolate cake because he knew Maya liked it. It was there when Maya called him after midnight because she had just discovered a mistake in a foundation application and knew he would still be awake. It was there when Adrian arrived at the hospital after Maya's minor accident during a foundation visit, not because she had asked him to come, but because someone had told him she was there. He stood beside her bed looking more frightened than she was. "You didn't have to come," Maya told him. Adrian pulled a chair closer. "I know," she smiled. "Then why are you here?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because I wanted to be." She didn't answer. Neither did he. But something changed between them that night. It was not a declaration. It was not a dramatic confession. It was simply the realization that their concern for each other had grown beyond obligation. Adrian had once believed his connection to Maya existed because Lucas had connected their lives. Now he understood that Lucas had been the beginning of their story, not the reason it had to continue. Months became years. The Second Alarm Foundation expanded into several states. They established educational grants for children of fallen firefighters, mentorship programs with active firefighters, and emergency funds for families who suddenly found themselves without a parent. Maya insisted on visiting schools personally whenever possible. She wanted the children to know that the people behind the foundation understood that grief did not end when the funeral ended. Adrian handled the financial side, but he increasingly left decisions to Maya. He trusted her instincts. She had an ability to see what people needed before they knew how to ask for it. One evening, after a long foundation event, they sat outside on the steps of the building while the city lights came on around them. Maya removed her shoes and rubbed her tired feet. Adrian laughed softly. "Long day, you have no idea. I have several ideas." She glanced at him. "You know, when we first met, I thought you were intimidating. Only intimidating, very. And now?" Maya pretended to consider the question. "Still intimidating." Adrian laughed. "That's disappointing." "But less than before." They sat quietly. After a while, Maya looked at him. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Lucas hadn't gone back into that warehouse?" Adrian's smile disappeared. "More than you know. I used to think about it too." She looked toward the street. "I used to wonder what my life would have been like if he had come home that night." Adrian understood. There were questions neither of them could answer. "I'm sorry," he said. Maya shook her head. "Don't be. You didn't take him from me." Adrian looked at her. "I know, but sometimes I still feel guilty that he died saving me." Maya turned toward him. "That's exactly what you need to stop believing." He remained silent. "Lucas made a choice," she continued. "A brave one. But it was his choice. You survived because he wanted you to survive. Don't turn that into another way of losing him." Adrian looked down at his hands. The silver ring caught the light. "I spent 20 years thinking I owed him my life." "You did owe him something," Maya said gently. Adrian looked up. "What, not your guilt?" She paused. "Your life." He understood what she meant. The debt was not a punishment. It was a responsibility to live fully. Adrian had spent years building companies, accumulating wealth, and searching for Lucas because he believed survival had created an obligation he could never repay. But Lucas had never asked him to repay anything. He had asked him to become strong and protect someone else. The difference was enormous. Adrian looked at Maya. "You know what I think." "What I think Lucas would have liked you telling me that." Maya smiled. "He probably would have said I was too stubborn." He would have been right. Probably. Their eyes met and neither looked away. There was warmth between them now, something deeper than friendship and more certain than either had expected. Adrian reached for her hand. Maya let him take it. No promises were made that night. They did not need them. Their relationship had grown slowly through trust, rather than urgency, through shared work, rather than circumstance, and through the simple discovery that each felt more at peace when the other was near. When Adrian finally told Maya that he loved her, it happened on an ordinary morning. There were no cameras, no foundation ceremony, no expensive restaurant, and no carefully planned speech. They were standing in the kitchen of the foundation office, arguing about whether Adrian had forgotten to order enough coffee for the staff. Maya was laughing when Adrian suddenly became quiet. What she asked. He smiled. "Nothing. That isn't a nothing face. I love you." Maya stared at him. For a moment neither moved. Then she smiled in a way Adrian had never seen before. "You took long enough." He laughed. "I was trying not to ruin it." "You almost did." "Almost." She stepped closer. "Almost." Then she kissed him. It was simple, warm, and completely free of the past. For the first time, there was no Lucas between them. Not because they had forgotten him, but because they no longer needed his memory to explain why they belonged together. Their love was their own. Years later, on the anniversary of the warehouse fire, Adrian and Maya returned to the quiet memorial garden they had built beside the headquarters of the Second Alarm Foundation. The garden contained a simple stone engraved with the names of firefighters who had died while saving others. Lucas's name was there too. Maya carried a small wooden box. Adrian knew what was inside. She opened it carefully. Lucas's silver ring rested on a piece of dark velvet. Adrian removed his own ring. For 20 years, he had worn it through every important moment of his life. He had treated it almost like a sacred obligation. Now he understood that he no longer needed to carry it as proof of a debt. He placed his ring beside Lucas's. The two silver bands lay next to each other almost identical, separated by 20 years of loss and connected by a single act of courage. Maya stood beside him. "Are you sure?" she asked. Adrian nodded. "Yes. You don't want to wear it anymore." He looked at the rings. "I don't need to." Maya understood. Why Adrian took a slow breath. "Because I finally understand what he was trying to tell me." He looked toward Lucas's name carved into the stone. "He didn't save me so I could spend the rest of my life trying to repay him. He saved me because he believed my life could become something worth protecting." Maya slipped her hand into his. Adrian continued. "For 20 years I thought survival was a debt. Now I know it was a gift." Maya squeezed his fingers. "And what do you do with a gift?" Adrian smiled. "You pass it on." They stood together in silence. Somewhere beyond the garden, children were laughing as they left a foundation event. One of them carried a scholarship folder under her arm. Another wore a small firefighter helmet she had received from a volunteer. Life continued around them. It was imperfect. It still contained grief, loss, and unanswered questions. But it also contained possibility. Adrian looked at Maya and realized that the greatest thing Lucas had given him was not the ring. It was not even the rescue itself. It was the chance to become the kind of man who could turn survival into purpose. And Maya had become part of that purpose not because she was Lucas's sister, but because she had taught Adrian that love could grow without replacing grief. It could exist beside it. They would always miss Lucas. Maya would always carry the ache of losing her brother. Adrian would always remember the teenager he had been inside that burning warehouse, and the firefighter who had walked back into the flames. But their memories no longer trapped them in the past. They had become the foundation upon which they built something new. The Second Alarm Foundation continued long after the two rings were placed together. Every scholarship became another answer to Lucas's final lesson. Every child given a chance at a better future became another life touched by the courage of a man who had refused to leave a stranger behind. Adrian eventually stopped searching for the perfect way to honor Lucas. He had found it, not in monuments, not in wealth, not in a lifetime of repayment. It was in the lives they helped protect. It was in Maya's laughter beside him. It was in the children who could dream about their futures because someone had chosen to stand beside their families after tragedy. And it was in the quiet certainty that Lucas's final lesson had never been about owing a debt. It had been about living well, about becoming strong enough to protect others, about taking the life you were given and making it meaningful. Adrian looked once more at the two rings resting side by side. Then he took Maya's hand, and together they walked away from the memorial garden. They did not walk away from Lucas. They carried him with them not as a burden, not as an unfinished debt, but as a promise fulfilled through every good thing they chose to do with the lives he had helped save.